So I've noticed that almost every English speaker has apologized for something. So in, in that tradition, I'm going to apologize for the very primitive PowerPoint that I have. Okay? So musical discovery. Musical discovery is always mediated by the selections of others. But for many people now, and especially for young people, that other is digital technology. So in lieu of a process in which we develop our taste and opinions as we encounter both new music and the perspectives of other people, digital discovery circumvents the labor, the discomfort, and the potential risks involved by selecting for us on the basis of what we already know we like. This frictionless experience, is that the same, what is the word in French? Frictionless experience? Do we have that?
Where is it?
It's not there. Okay, the word frictionless is, yeah. So it.
Sans friction?
Sans friction. Okay, but it's a term in English that means that essentially the decisions are pre-selected. The path is pre-selected. So the designers make the selection of our digital paths. So this frictionless experience offers simplification, ease, and most important, certainty. And this is especially attractive in an era characterized by the precarity, not only of work, but also of emotional or affective life. But of course, despite its promises, open-ended discovery fails to produce desirable outcomes a significant portion of the time. And one piece of evidence is consistent with what Arne had said earlier today, that nearly half of the songs that are streamed on Spotify are not played to the end. So that's 48.6% of songs on Spotify are not played to the end. And an astonishing 25% of those songs are skipped in the first 5 seconds. So why do we reject the critics, for instance, but accept the authority of monopolistic tech companies that get it wrong half the time? Why do we shy away from the risks and the possible pleasures of discovery? What are the consequences of digital discovery practices for what we discover, what we listen to, and how we experience music? And more broadly, my research addresses the question, how does this frictionless experience come to affect the aesthetic one? My argument is that processes of mediation that encourage aesthetic engagement are being supplanted by a dialectic of personalization and popularity. Personalization and popularity. So the system is designed to personalize our experience by replicating and indeed predicting our taste, but the music services seek to fulfill that promise on the basis of the aggregated preferences of the largest number of people. Navigating the system also presupposes that we know our taste in advance. You know, as though taste is something that exists prior to the experience of hearing and discovering music, rather than something that is developed precisely through those experiences. Further, as we search digital media to discover something new, the quantified preferences and quote-unquote opinion of everyone else confronts us at every turn. Now, of course, all of us contribute to those metrics by our very presence online. Yet, in a classic case of reification, they appear to us as something alien, something beyond our activities and intentions that nevertheless has an enormous influence on both what we listen to and how we listen. So I want to clarify what's at stake. We've had some conversations about what the implications are and what the challenges are. So let me phrase it this way. Many social philosophers have made the case for the aesthetic as an alternative to the routine or reified forms of experience characteristic of modern societies. So John Dewey saw aesthetic experience as, quote, an active and alert commerce with the world, end quote, and an opening to new possibilities of perception, of seeing or feeling or hearing. For Theodore Adorno, aesthetic experience provides a paradigm for ethical conduct, particularly in the encounter with difference. He saw aesthetic experience as, quote, a refuge for mimetic comportment, end quote. So this is a receptive orientation that creates the potential for nonviolent and non-dominative relations between subject and object. Nicholas Compertis conceptualizes receptivity as an active process in which, rather than willing something to happen, we allow ourselves to be affected by experience. We allow ourselves to be decentered. But receptivity is also a form of normative agency in which we're called upon to let another voice become audible and to respond. Similarly, for Jacques Rancière, art can create a disturbance in the distribution of the sensible, the consensus of who or what can be seen or heard, or the very terms of intelligibility. So if the frictionless experience has the potential to subvert the aesthetic one, far more is at stake, I believe, than the simple pleasures of listening. Yet the discourse of democratization that is so widely circulating in the digital music world has shielded it from a sustained critique of its potential impact on aesthetic experience, and by extension, on our receptivity to the claims of others, including the other of music itself. So the research approach was this. In order to map the dominant pathways of digital musical discovery for young people, the assumptions that undergird that experience and the terms in which it was articulated, I conducted focus group interviews with my research assistant. I did not have a huge grant. I had a few dollars to pay a graduate student. His name is J.L. Johnson. He's a terrific sociologist. Thank you. But we did interviews with 39 university students and young professionals in the Washington, D.C. area. So my intention here was not to do an ethnography of listening or a study of taste, but rather to do something in the tradition of Frankfurt School critical theory, which was a critique of ideology that holds up the promise of digital music technology to the reality of its use. Dialogical research was really essential to this project because, I wasn't really that concerned with outcomes. I wasn't really all that concerned with the kind of choices that people make, but rather how they come to make those choices and how they speak about their experience of doing so. The focus group format was also really interesting in terms of seeing how people talk with one another about their taste preferences and how they experience social media and experience expressing themselves even in the interviews. They expressed a tremendous amount of anxiety about sharing their tastes and wanted to make sure, and this is almost across the board, that the focus groups were a quote-unquote judgment-free zone. People felt that they were going to be judged. So where do people go? Who do they trust? Respondents use a wide range of sources, sites, and apps for musical discovery, and of course rely on their friends. Most begin their searches through sites where they can listen to music for free. Absolutely, and YouTube videos ranked very high on that list. Again, terrestrial radio was also an important source, but for most people it was situational. In the car, going to work, I wake up in the morning. Only 2 interviewees had read any professional music criticism. Another followed Pitchfork's Twitter feed, and 1 person read blogs for music recommendations. But the digital music world is a virtual phantasmagoria, very much in Walter Benjamin's sense, and people are frankly overwhelmed. So rather than a kind of exhilarating freedom of choice, the anomie and anxiety generated by the digital environment seem to encourage passivity. And again, with the passing of the critical establishment, even greater reliance on corporate entities and data companies to guide musical choices. Yet, focus group respondents cling passionately to the notion that our judgments of taste are our own. So we asked, do you ever read criticism? Nope. No, because we might disagree. Look, it's so interesting. You might disagree, so that's a reason not to read. And if they were to say, this is horrible music and you shouldn't listen to it, and I don't listen to it, but I might have ended up, I would have loved it. I don't want to be biased by anybody's personal opinions. I don't have knowledge of it. Find out for yourself, that's my motto. Others claim that critics aren't listening the same way ordinary people do. It's like they aren't thinking about the song the way that I would. I'm not sitting there analyzing it. They might say critics don't usually say, this is the perfect Friday afternoon getting out of work song, but that's what I'm looking for. And that kind of orientation to music as something that's specific to a situation or a mood was a very dominant theme. One respondent pointed out that it's very hard to know who to trust. I think there was a time when information was so centralized, you'd read the paper, there's a certain music column section, and you had a certain writer, and if you liked their taste, then you start to follow them. But now, I think information is so decentralized that it's like there's so many opinions being tossed around, you lose focus on who is saying what. So for most people, the solution is clear. If you can't trust the individual voice, or if you find it potentially threatening, put your faith in the numbers. But reconciling the contradiction between independence of judgment and the power of quantization can become quite convoluted. So here's Kate. You don't really need someone else to evaluate it for you if you can listen to it and appreciate it. And you know, whatever, before you listen to it, you can look at YouTube and see what other people have said. Really, if everyone's like, this is terrible, you probably won't like it, which not many people will, because you probably want to see for yourself. But I mean, like, it's going to be your own music. The only person's evaluation that matters is your own. You know, and this is actually pretty typical that people would respond by saying, well, you don't really need anybody's opinion, but here are all the things you do. So you go and you look at YouTube and you look at the numbers, but you don't really need to know that. Because ultimately, you know, like in the same sentence or the same phrase. Later in the same interview, Kate expressed another widely held view that while you can't trust the critics, you can trust people, right? And so casting the numbers as democratic like this is a strategy that seems to work to preserve the sense of independent judgment, despite the far greater authority they seem to exert on listening choices and practices. So JL says, Rolling Stone magazine used to rate albums with these stars, and Kate says, iTunes has that now, except it's with the people who go on iTunes and listen to it, and then they review it. So it's not critics, it's just people who are on iTunes. And then they give either a song or an album a rating, well, and it just gets averaged up. And Alex agrees, yes, I just rely more on the average rate, a lot of people, rather than one critic. Yet while respondents claim to be at least somewhat influenced by the number of people or the most downloaded, they rarely read the comments in which discursive opinion might actually be expressed. Instead, they use the comments as additional data points. So Annie says, I feel like YouTube comments just evolve into weird personal snips about other YouTube commenters. So yeah, I don't usually look at those too carefully. Sometimes I'll look to see how many people have commented on, or how many times this video has been watched, or something like that. But I don't watch, you know, I wouldn't look at them in depth. And yet, most respondents were also very well aware that popularity online isn't necessarily an indication that something is good. This is like the Gangnam style situation. So here's a sort of long quote about Kitty Pride. Do we know Kitty Pride? This is, you know, another sort of bizarre, crappy music video. So do you ever think some music is good because it has lots of views? Oh no, like Kitty Pride. Have you seen this video for Kitty Pride? She has like millions of views on YouTube, and it's awful. I feel like, you know, songs like you can't depend on how many likes or views a song has because things go viral so easily now. Yeah. And it's like, well, I have to watch it because everyone else is talking about it. Yeah, most of the time it's a reason to discount it, like, what did this person do to become so popular? What crazy thing did she do? And also, is it now too popular for me to like anymore? Annie, it also makes me feel like, why haven't I heard this before? Why am I so out of the loop from the millions of people who've watched it? So again, you can see in here also the kind of contradictions that people are trying to manage. You know, as Alexis de Tocqueville keenly observed, when the power of entrenched cultural hierarchies is dismantled and cultural authority becomes more diffuse, people are more likely than ever to turn to each other to relieve the anxiety of making judgments on their own. So for people in this age group who have the sort of social pressures you know, to form social networks and to be in the loop, are kind of aggregated with face the sort of pressure of the aggregated opinions of everyone who's online. It's no wonder that, as Alexandra Molotko wrote in the New York Times, thanks to social media, cool no longer means knowing about the stuff no one else has heard of. it means knowing about the stuff everyone else already likes. Right? And of course, you know, the world of professional criticism, this is reversed, because the professional critics were there to tell us about the stuff that we didn't already know about. Right? Now, of course, popularity is not as straightforward as the numbers might suggest. What people are curious about and will click on is frequently a result of the desire to know what everyone else knows, and popularity is often recursively produced in this way. Social media metrics are unreliable measures of popularity for a long list of other reasons that include algorithmic skew, affective skew, non-representativeness, and overt manipulation. And Nancy Boehm has some interesting work on this. Nevertheless, it seems that these numbers are either supplanting commentary, evaluation, and judgment, or becoming synonymous with them. And this produces a strange irony that digital media is a highly evaluative environment in which discursive opinion or judgment barely seems to matter. Now, whereas for individuals, the dialectic of personalization and popularity is a matter of navigating the range of available choices, for the digital music services, it's actually built into the technical design. Of course, personalization is not a new development in music. Cassette mixtapes were the precursors to Pandora's stations or Spotify's playlists, allowing us to create the soundtracks of our day or month or circumstance. But the ease of use of digital technology signals an important difference. And again, frictionless means that the pathways have been pre-selected, made by the designers so that users are relieved of the burden of having to choose for themselves. So rather than a kind of creative or reflexive process if you were going to make a mixtape, we lob in a couple of preferences and the algorithms do the rest. And indeed, apps that allow us to select our mood, select a time of day, select an activity, sit back and wait for the results were enormously popular, and they are becoming even more so. So the streaming services also promote a context-driven conception of music for specific situational use. Okay, let Spotify bring you the right music for every mood and moment, the perfect song for your workout, your night in, or your journey to work. So advertising good music is risky in this business model because it would imply a curatorial or critical evaluation that might not appeal to the greatest number of people. So it's a much safer bet to promote a conception of music as good for something else. And indeed, the idea that one can have the perfect song for any mood, situation, or activity has become doxa. And a quote, and I love this one, "A good song for me is what satisfies me at the exact moment of what I want to listen to," quote. Or, quote, "it fits the moment," or, quote, "fits my mood." Now, this is not a new criterion for music listeners, but the promise of personalization, I would argue, has created an expectation that profoundly affects the listening experience. So again, personalization is something that, you know, there's a continuity, you know, between mixtapes and all of that. But this expectation, I would argue, really signifies a radical change, because personalization is no longer something that we engage in and we do and we critically reflect on, or we just, you know, sort of figure out for ourselves. But it's also become a demand. This is what listeners expect from the streaming services, and when they don't get it, they're pissed. So rarely is being confronted with the unexpected or surprising considered a good thing. You see, that's why I hate Spotify, because it would take me to a random song, and I would get so pissed off, like it would really annoy me. Yeah, I mean, you're picking a genre because you want to be in that genre at the moment. Like, I still get annoyed. Sometimes Pandora, because it pulls in songs from other genres that are somewhat similar but not really similar, because it's like it doesn't fit what you're doing at the moment. And this expectation of personalization, I think, has radically restructured the listening experience. Skipping, or nexting, of course, is the backup plan if the algorithms disappoint. For me, it's like I give a 15-second measure. If in the first 15 seconds it doesn't have the necessary beat or the rhythm or whatever I need. I think that's so profound. You know, it's not just that I'm listening to music to listen. It has to be, you know, attentive to what I need at that moment. That's usually my cutoff, because I have this list of things, of my go-to things that I know is going to work. And then Craig says, yes, look at this lovely next button. And then there's this one. I look for songs I know already. I don't like listening to new songs usually, unless I'm listening to live music. So on my iPod, I'm constantly shuffling because it's like not the right time for that song. And for new songs, it's almost never the right time.
Mine is one now.
Okay. Yeah, I have a few more remarks. I'll be finished in a second. Aesthetic receptivity requires persistence, or as Comfortis has put it, lingering. It takes time for experience or beauty to unfold, for us to really hear music or the voices of others, for the new or different to become audible, much less to begin to make some sense. On the other hand, the system of digital discovery not only promises immediate satisfaction, but provides us with the technical tools to click our way out of any experience that might feel dangerous or unsettling. Manipulation of the digital musical object and of our affective experience of it has become so technically simple and has been so heavily promoted that any experience that may decenter or transform us has become suspect, if not undesirable. It seems from the research that I've done that the frictionless experience, rather than the aesthetic one, is beginning to shape musical expectations and desires. Thank you very much for your kind attention.